Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. One of the most remarkable moments in galactic history happened during what's known as the Rousan Reformation. The Galactic Republic, centuries before the Separatist Crisis, voluntarily demilitarized. The Jedi abandoned their commissions as leaders of the Army of the Light after defeating the Sith during the last Battle of Rousan. This was the defining moment of this period of galactic history, and it went against the currents of millennia of interstellar warfare. From the foreboding dark side force-powered fleets of the Rakan Infinite Empire, to the massive forces of automatons leading the charge for the Internal Empire, to the marauding bands of Mandalorian commandos fighting on behalf of the terrifying Sith, who also commanded legions of thralls and slave combatants. The Galactic Republic bucked the trend, and in a moment of either clarity or insanity, depends on who you ask, they abandoned their standing military, which for thousands and thousands of years guarded the Republic. They voluntarily gave up their military might, while others say that they gave up on the responsibility they had to protect their constituents. If you take a look at most nations here on Earth, as societies become more developed, as tribes and villages join together to create federations, as hamlets turn into towns, into cities, as states join together to form unions and nations, resources and the powers that decide where those resources will be deployed becomes more and more concentrated at the top and at the center. In the United States, the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad connected this massive country for the first time. It also hugely expanded federal power and set a norm for the federal government to get involved in land management, economic regulations, and it also gave the federal government a precedent to be involved in future national infrastructure programs like the post-World War II interstate highway system. As a country founded by refugees escaping religious and political persecution, immigrants that were trying to start a new life, it was always very common for Americans to have a more libertarian view on a government. There's constant distrust. But even in America, as the country grew larger and larger, as things became more complex, the federal government was also tasked with more responsibilities. It was always inevitable. For the first 100 years or so in American history, most of the military power in the country was actually concentrated and organized at the state level. If you take a look at the Civil War period, all the most famous units were organized at the local or state level, like the Irish Brigade of the 69th New York Infantry or the 20th Maine Volunteer Infantry Regiment. And of course, you have Stonewall Jackson's brigade, which was made up of 5 Virginian regiments. It really wasn't until the 20th century, after 2 massive world wars, that the United States would establish a large permanent military, even during peacetime. Now imagine if at the end of the Cold War, the President of the United States went on TV and simply stated, hey, our enemies are defeated. Let's do some proper reform to our military. The United States no longer needs a federal military, and instead all the resources from our massive defense budget will now flow to individual National Guard units and state defense forces. And maybe even to that neighborhood watch you just set up, Steve, with your neighbors. Who knows, maybe you wake up one day and there's a striker on your lawn with a crate of portable man pads right next to it. Sounds really cool, right? There is something generally likable about governance at the local level, specialized for the needs of the local populace. But think about this clearly for a second, Steve. You no longer can really just do neighborhood watch as a hobby. That's a lot of weapons on your lawn. You've basically become a professional soldier at this point, because if you don't post guards around those man pads and, the striker 24/7, those packs of wild, unsocialized teenagers that roam your neighborhood could accidentally pull a Donetsk Republic special and, shoot down a commercial airliner by accident. With great firepower comes great responsibility, and so you're probably going to have to fortify your home. You're probably going to have to take out your daughter's bedroom that's above the garage to fit the striker inside. You'll need some kind of safe room to put those man pads in there, because they fetch a lot of money on the black market. I'm pretty sure it's illegal for citizens to own that. But yeah, it's a lot of problems. And that's basically what started happening all across the galaxy. You had planetary defense forces that were suddenly given a huge responsibility and an influx of resources and very deadly weapons. But of course, this is a front-loaded deal. It seems awesome at first, like, oh, look at all this hardware. It's cool. I'm a guy, I get it. I would love to have my own personal striker vehicle, but, is it really necessary for defending my home from porch pirates? Probably not. And the maintenance, the cost of maintaining all of this, that is what really sinks these type of operations. And as the federal government starts shifting away from its defense responsibilities and starts investing in infrastructure and social programs like Lena So's Great Works, guess whose funding gets cut first? It's going to be the Outer Rim planets and their, planetary defense forces. Because all of those funds are technically discretionary spending as far as the budget is concerned, and more importantly, because the core worlds had far more political power and far more resources, they would be far less likely to depend on federal subsidies to secure their own worlds. And because of the high concentration of wealthy and high traffic worlds in the core region, you have many overlapping security forces that are very professional that make it very difficult for pirates and bandits to actually establish a foothold and operate freely. And so what happens is the wealthy core region planets end up spending a much smaller percentage of their tax revenue on defense. Whereas the politically isolated Outer Rim worlds, especially the smallest ones that might not even have representation, are left the most dependent on federal subsidies for defense. You look at a world like Navarro, it's a perfect example of the problems that a typical Outer Rim planet faced. There's a very low population, not much industry or corporate presence. It realistically could never fund a professional defense force without heavy federal support, which means that pirate fleets that would be cornered and quickly destroyed if they ever appeared in the core systems are allowed to freely roam in this system. So what happens in the Republic post-Rousan Reformation? What happens if you have marauding bandits occupying entire worlds, or pirate kings shutting down trading lanes as happened during the Stark Hyperspace War? Well, officially speaking, the judicial branch of the government is tasked with solving problems that one single planet or system can't handle. It's like in the United States when the Intercontinental Railroad and eventually road systems started connecting individual states to one another. You started having what's known as interstate crime, which of course led to the creation of the Federal Bureau of Investigations in the early 20th century. And just like our own FBI, the Judicial Department was initially more of a paperwork-driven investigative bureau that didn't really have that much direct action capabilities. Instead, the judicials used diplomacy and the weight of the federal government's resources to solve problems. Their style of enforcing the law can be clearly seen in the design of their main starship, the Consular Class Light Cruiser. This is a Carillion Engineering Corporation vessel, one of the larger ones that the company produced at 115 meters in length, equipped with 3 large and reliable Dyne 577 radial atomizer engines. You might even mistake this vessel as a blockade runner or smuggling ship. It is clearly oriented for fast speed and maneuverability. Paired with a decent Class 2 hyperdrive, this ship is able to go from one trouble spot in the galaxy to another. But look a little closer and you're going to notice something strange. One, the Consular Class Light Cruiser is generally painted the color red, or as I like to call it, diplomatic crimson. Most warships typically like to conceal, their presence when they're in system. A lot of them are not painted. They're just regular gray durasteel, or if they do paint them, it's maybe some kind of stealth coating. When you paint your starship crimson red, it's really a way to attract attention. It's kind of like a poisonous frog or a snake that says, hey, don't mess with me because you will die if you do mess with me. And that is sort of the reason why these judicial ships are painted this way. It's to warn people not to shoot at this ship. But here's the thing, the Consular Class Light Cruiser is not really dangerous in the traditional sense. If you take a closer look at the schematics on this thing, you'll notice that it has 0 weapons, which is kind of crazy. I mean, even the most poorly built commercial vessel or civilian freighter has at least a few point defense turrets. If not for shooting pirates, they're at least quite useful for shooting, like space debris, or at least just having laser turrets tends to kind of scare off bandits and pirates, at least the more cowardly ones. And so no, like the lack of any weapons on the Consular Class Light Cruiser is not because of budget cuts, it's not because they're cheap. This is a deliberate design choice that is designed to send a clear message about the judicial force's intentions. The Galactic Republic seeks to do no harm to its constituents. It is here for peace. And that crimson red is simply warning people to not attack the ship because it is unarmed, and you will look very bad if you do attack this ship, because it does serve as a representative of the Republic's interests all across the galaxy. That or the Republic really doesn't trust the judicial forces not to screw something up, so by removing weapons, you also remove the possibility of a diplomatic incident.
All right, Alan, you're gonna have to hand over your gun.
Yes, sir. Captain, you really want to disarm this guy? Take out the batteries in the calculator.
All right, I'm gonna give you this. This is a dummy gun. I use it for ceremony. There.
Anyway, this actually did work. I mean, most people respected the Crimson Red. I wouldn't say they feared it, but you were generally an idiot if you attacked one of these ships because the galaxy was just that united. There would be considerable outrage and there would be action done against anyone who would do something so foolish. Some of you might say that it's a bit naive for the Republic to have mainly unarmed ships making up their judicial fleet, but then again, 1,000 years of peace creates trends and mindsets that are very strange and unrelatable to people like us who live on a planet that is constantly experiencing warfare. So if we take a closer look at the Consular Light Cruiser schematics, we'll begin to really understand what this thing is designed to do because it becomes very obvious. First of all, the Consular has a large amount of sensors on the front of the ship and multiple communication terminals on the bridge that allows the ship to accept all types of transmissions, including strange alien ones that might be using different types of energy signals or communication methods. We usually also have a protocol droid on board that can translate any language. The Republic clearly favors diplomacy, and it wants its agents to have clear communication with anyone it encounters so that it can gather the proper information before acting. The ship itself served as neutral ground for negotiations, either between sovereign planets and the Republic, or if the Republic is playing intermediary in some type of conflict, these ships could also host negotiations between two different factions or parties. This all takes place in the saloon pod that is located beneath the bridge. It has seats for more than a dozen people and was the most secured part of the ship. In case of emergencies, this pod could even be ejected like a lifeboat. The pod had its own life support and communication hub, and you could basically just sit there and communicate a rescue ship. The Consular Class Light Cruiser, despite having any weapons, has an extraordinary safety record. And a part of this is because, again, people respected the neutrality and diplomacy of the Republic. Also, the perceived penalty for attacking one of these ships was facing a team of Jedi enforcers, which terrified most people. And if a member state was dumb enough to attack one of these ships, well, the Republic could react with very heavy economic sanctions and embargoes that could, essentially destroy a planet's economy overnight. Also, like many Corellian vessels, the Consular Class Light Cruiser was designed with a military-class frame and was extremely robust. All of the energy now devoted to the weapon systems were placed in the deflector shields. Should the Consular Class Light Cruiser's diplomatic shield fail to protect it, the actual shields, the armor, and maneuverability of the ship was more than enough to protect it from most physical threats. Also, the crew of a Consular Class Light Cruiser is kept small for security reasons. The ship had just a crew of 9 with a large detachment of droids doing most of the busy work. The saloon pod could carry about 16 people, and it contained what I like to call the real power of the Republic. For instance, take a look at the Stark Hyperspace Crisis. This was a trade conflict started between two parties, a group of pirates known as the Stark Combine and the Trade Federation. The Trade Federation was using its monopoly of all shipping lanes in the Outer Rim to exploit the people of the Outer Rim with outrageous price gouging and predatory practices designed to kill competition. The Stark Combine exploited public sentiment and started attacking the Trade Federation's ships and, kind of labeled themselves as like Robin Hood-like figures. In reality, these were just a bunch of opportunistic bandits who were themselves being worked over by the Sith, who wanted to create as much chaos in the galaxy as possible. One of the huge problems that the Star Combine was creating for the galaxy was the fact that they were targeting Trade Federation ships with Bacta on it, and this was creating a huge shortage in this life-saving fluid. Senator Finis Valorum came up with a plan for a diplomatic meeting on the Combine world at Troikan, where all the parties in the conflict would meet together and discuss some kind of diplomatic end to the war. A Consular Class Light Cruiser was deployed to Troikan with a team of Jedi negotiators and Republic diplomats. The hope was to end a conflict before it could even start. One single red crimson ship trying to save the entire galaxy. Unfortunately, the peace efforts was derailed by Ranulph Tarkin. Yes, he is related to Will Huff. He's his uncle. The man was a militarist, and he wanted to take control of the Republic and establish a massive federal military force. Ranulph had gathered a large force of planetary defense forces and had secretly planned, with Newt Gunray, who was also at the meeting, to attack the conference. Aiko Stark, the leader of the Stark Combine, had found out about this treachery using his own informants and spies, and things basically got out of hand. The Jedi and Newt Gunray barely escape the melee and get to their Consular Class Light Cruiser and make it out of this dodgy situation. And that was the true purpose of this ship. The power of the Republic was concentrated in its diplomatic core, its political power, and also its economic power. And the Consular Class Light Cruisers were a direct extension of that power. And even though it doesn't have any weapons, well, sometimes the craziest man in the room isn't the one armed to the teeth with guns, but the individual who brings nothing to the gunfight. That's a whole different level of madness. And the reality is, if there ever was a large enough threat that actually needed a military response, the Consular Class Light Cruiser would be deployed to every major world in the galaxy with Jedi and Republic diplomats to organize a defense fleet out of planetary defense forces. Kind of like what Ronald Tarkin attempted to do with his attack at Troikan, although that ended up in disaster. And the Star Combine had planted a virus into the nav computers on his ship, sending many of them on random jumps. Some ships ended up in the middle of a star or a black hole. It was kind of a tragedy. And as we see during the High Republic, the real way that judicial forces respond to larger threats like the non-Marauders was by first using the Jedi as first responders and then using diplomatic relations with member worlds to raise a fleet made up of planetary defense forces, usually under the command of judicial officers. During the Nile Crisis, we had the creation of the Republic Defense Coalition, a coordinated task force that was able to strike back at the Nile fleets. The Judicial Department also contracted all sorts of mercenaries who provided their own ships and crews for a variety of different missions, either to patrol trouble spots that they didn't have resources to do, or to even escort these Consular Class Light Cruisers through very difficult parts of the galaxy. With the Republic's endless resources, wealth, and political power, as long as you keep the diplomat alive on board one of these ships, they can contact the right people and raise a fleet out of thin air in seconds. And while the use of unarmed ships might seem a bit extreme and naive, we do have to consider that the Republic, throughout its history, always preferred to limit the size of their standing army in fleets during times of peace. Preferring to spend said resources on developing the infrastructure and wealth of the Republic, any security spending was usually focused mainly on keeping the trading routes open. This is typically what a trade and economic focused republic does when it has money and resources. Take a look at the United States post-World War II. The U.S. Marshall Plan sent billions in aids and resources to help rebuild war-torn Europe. The United States also maintained the largest naval fleet in the world during this time period and used it to carry out freedom of navigation operations designed to protect and facilitate global trade. These two policies created the global economy we all live in today, and, as far as big picture goes, it's definitely been a beneficial thing for humanity. This is the strength of these types of political and economic systems. There still is exploitation, there still is corruption and other issues that are rooted in greed, fear, and the other darker parts of human nature. The thing is, every system, and trust me on this, I've lived and I've seen multiple systems, left wing, right wing, also in the middle, and every system, including the one that you believe in, will still have the same type of corruption that is really driven by human nature more than anything. There really isn't a perfect system. There are just lesser evils. To me, it's clear that systems like the Galactic Republic are far more beneficial to the galaxy than any other major power in Star Wars, from the Galactic Empire to the Sith Empire to the Rakan Infinite Empire, which all used its military assets and starships to force its constituents to obey. And so it's almost fitting that with the beginning of the Clone Wars, a falsely orchestrated conflict designed to destroy the democratic institutions of the Republic also marked the first time a judicial Consular Class Light Cruiser was armed for warfare. Known as Project Supercharger, Corellian Engineering Corporation and the Republic Defense Procurement Office came together and added more armor to the hull, an improved set of engines, and more importantly 5 twin turbo laser turrets to the Consular Class Light Cruiser. Dubbed the Charger C-70 retrofit, the new and improved Consular was a terrific escort ship, fast and heavily armed. And I gotta admit, it's a really beautiful ship. It looks like a lot of fun, but it also is a sad reminder of what the Republic will lose in the coming years. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.